When 8-year-old Mason Carter stood in his front yard in Bakersfield, California on a Saturday afternoon in late April, holding a handmade cardboard sign with 6 words written in shaky marker that would shatter hearts and mobilize strangers, nobody came to my birthday. He had no idea that the biker who just pulled up to the stop sign 20 feet away was Travis Hawk Henderson, road captain for the Valley Thunder Motorcycle Club, and a man whose own childhood had been marked by the same crushing loneliness Mason was experiencing right now, or that the photo Hawk would take of that sign and post to the club's group chat with a single sentence demanding immediate action would bring 40 motorcycles, 300 pounds of presents, a custom leather jacket with Mason's name on it, and enough cake to feed the entire neighborhood to a kid who'd been told by his classmates that nobody wanted to come to a party for the weird boy who didn't have a dad and whose mom worked 2 jobs and couldn't afford the kind of elaborate celebrations other families threw. This is the story of how one child's public heartbreak became a rallying cry for a brotherhood that understood what it meant to be overlooked and forgotten, and how sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't what they asked for, but the knowledge that they matter enough for strangers to show up when everyone else stayed away. The house sat on a quiet street in East Bakersfield, one of those neighborhoods where working families lived paycheck to paycheck, where lawns were more brown than green because water cost money people didn't have, where cars and driveways showed years of wear and houses showed deferred maintenance, not because people didn't care, but because survival took priority over appearance. It was 2:47 on a Saturday afternoon in late April, the kind of perfect spring day where the temperature hit 78 degrees and the sky was cloudless blue and everything felt like it should be good and right in the world. Travis Hawk Henderson had been riding through the neighborhood on his way back from a parts run, taking the scenic route because sometimes you needed the therapy of open road and rumbling engine, even if you were just crossing town. He was 41 years old, built lean and hard from years of construction work, with dark hair going gray at the temples and a beard he kept trimmed short. His black leather vest bore the Valley Thunder MC patches, a lightning bolt splitting the valley floor, along with his road captain designation and pins marking 12 years with the club. Valley Thunder had been riding together for 17 years, known throughout Kern County as the club that organized food drives for farm worker families that showed up after the earthquakes and fires that periodically devastated the region to help rebuild, that ran a back-to-school supply program serving over 1,500 kids every August. Hawk had been a member for 12 years, finding in the club the sense of purpose and belonging that had eluded him through a childhood spent in foster care, bouncing between homes where he was tolerated but never wanted, learning early that the world didn't care about kids who didn't have advocates. He'd aged out of the system at 18 with nothing but a duffel bag and anger, and it had taken the Marines and then Valley Thunder to teach him that family could be chosen, that brotherhood could be earned, that belonging was possible even for people who'd started life unwanted. Hawk was slowing for the stop sign at the intersection of Fairview and Chester when he saw the kid. A boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, small and skinny with light brown hair that fell in his eyes, wearing jeans and a wrinkled button-up shirt that looked like someone had tried to make him presentable for something special. The kid stood in the front yard of a modest house, cement slab porch, chain-link fence with rust showing through white paint, holding a piece of cardboard about 2 feet square. The sign had been made with care, the edges cut straight, the letters written in thick black marker in the careful block printing of a child trying to be legible. 6 words, centered on the cardboard, each one a knife to anyone with a heart. Nobody came to my birthday. Hawk's bike came to a complete stop at the sign even though there was no traffic, even though he could have rolled through and continued on his way. He stared at the kid, at the sign, at the scene that was unfolding in front of him with devastating clarity. Behind the boy, the front yard had been decorated for a party, balloons in blue and silver tied to the fence posts, moving slightly in the breeze. A folding table set up near the porch with a plastic tablecloth, paper plates still in their packaging, cups, napkins. A birthday cake sat in the center of the table, store-bought but decorated with care, with 8 candles waiting to be lit. There were gift bags arranged on a second smaller table, party favors that nobody would receive. A cooler sat beside the porch steps, presumably full of drinks for guests who hadn't arrived. The boy held his sign and stared at the street with eyes that were red-rimmed from crying, but dry now, like he'd moved past tears into something harder, resignation maybe, or the beginning of understanding that he was the kind of kid people forgot about, the kind whose invitations got thrown away, whose friendship wasn't valued enough to spend a Saturday afternoon celebrating. Hawk felt something crack open in his chest, a pain so visceral it was almost physical, because he knew that expression, had worn it himself at 9 years old, standing in a foster home living room, waiting for a birthday party that his caseworker had promised to arrange, but that never materialized because the system was overwhelmed and one lonely kid's birthday wasn't a priority. He remembered the moment he'd understood that he didn't matter enough for people to remember, to show up, to care, and he'd spent the next 32 years trying to prove he was worth more than that initial judgment. Hawk pulled his phone from his vest pocket and took a photo of the boy with his sign, the decorated yard, the untouched party setup, the entire scene of hope turned to abandonment. Then he opened the Valley Thunder group chat, the one that connected 43 active members across Bakersfield and the surrounding area, and typed a message that was more command than request. Kid on Fairview in Chester having birthday party. Nobody showed up. He's standing in his yard with a sign saying, "Nobody came to my birthday. I need every brother who can roll to meet me here in 20 minutes. Bring presents, bring yourselves, bring whatever you got. We're throwing this kid a party he'll never forget." Who's in? The responses started coming in before Hawk even put his phone away. "I'm 10 minutes out. On my way. Got my kid's old bike in the garage. Never been used. Bringing it. Stopping at Target for presents. Be there in 15. My old lady's baking cookies will bring those." The group chat exploded with confirmations, with brothers dropping Saturday plans, with old ladies mobilizing, with the kind of immediate unified response that defined what Valley Thunder was about. Hawk swung his bike into a U-turn and pulled up to the curb in front of the house, killing the engine and removing his helmet. The boy watched him with wary eyes, the kind of wariness that came from experience with disappointment, the protective distance of someone who'd learned not to hope too hard. Hawk walked up to the chain-link fence, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening, aware that he was a large stranger in leather approaching a child alone in a yard. He stopped at the gate and called out to the house. "Hello? Parents home?" A woman appeared at the screen door, mid-30s, wearing scrubs like she worked in medical or dental, her face showing exhaustion that went bone deep. She looked at Hawk with the instant tension that came from seeing a biker in a cut at your front door, her hand already reaching for her phone. "Ma'am, I'm Hawk Henderson with Valley Thunder Motorcycle Club. I saw your son's sign. I'm wondering if you'd be okay with me and my club brothers throwing him a proper birthday party. We've got about 40 riders heading this way right now with presents and food, and we'd like to make sure this boy knows his birthday matters." The woman's face went through several emotions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, suspicion, and then something that looked like hope, fighting with the instinct to protect her child from strangers. "I'm Jennifer Carter. This is Mason." She stepped out onto the porch, her voice strained. "I sent out 20 invitations to his class 3 weeks ago. I called parents to confirm. Everyone said yes, but nobody came. Nobody even called to say they weren't coming. I don't understand. People are cruel," Hawk said quietly. "Kids are cruel because they learn it from their parents. But my brothers aren't cruel, and we don't let kids spend their birthdays alone if we can help it. Would you be comfortable with us being here? I can show you ID, give you our club president's number, whatever you need to feel safe." Jennifer looked at her son, at the sign he still held, at the decorated yard and untouched cake, and the defeat in Mason's small shoulders. She looked back at Hawk, assessing, calculating, making the kind of impossible decision parents had to make about who to trust. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, thank you. Mason, put the sign down, honey. These people are coming to your party." Mason looked at his mother, then at Hawk, his expression guarded. "Why would strangers come to my party when my friends didn't?" "Because real friends show up," Hawk said, kneeling down so he was closer to the boy's eye level, even with the fence between them. "And sometimes the people who care about you aren't the ones you expect. Your classmates made a choice today, and it was the wrong choice. But my brothers are making a different choice. We're choosing to celebrate you because every kid deserves to have their birthday matter." The sound reached them before the bikes came into view, the distinctive rumble of multiple Harley engines approaching in formation. Mason's eyes went wide as the first motorcycles turned onto Fairview, then the second, then the third. A rolling parade. Hawk opened the gate and gestured for the brothers to come in, and they filed into Mason's front yard one by one, this army of strangers who'd dropped everything to show up for a kid they'd never met. Steele, the club president, a massive man in his 50s with a completely bald head and a beard that reached his chest, approached Mason first. He carried a large wrapped box under one arm and knelt down despite his size, his voice gentle in a way that contradicted his appearance. "Happy birthday, Mason. I'm Steele. I hear you're turning 8 today. That's a good age. I brought you something I think you might like." He held out the box and Mason took it with trembling hands, looking at his mother for permission before carefully tearing the paper. Inside was a remote control car, professional grade, the kind that cost a couple $100. Mason's mouth fell open. "This is for me?" Steele nodded. "For you. Because today's your day and you deserve to have something awesome happen on your birthday." More brothers gathered around, introducing themselves, shaking Mason's hand with the respect they'd give an adult, presenting gifts. A new bicycle from Viper, still in the box. A complete Lego Minecraft set from Torch. Art supplies, a skateboard, a gaming headset, books, clothes, a telescope, gift cards to every store Mason could think of. The pile grew until the small table could no longer hold everything and presents spilled onto the grass. The old ladies, the wives and girlfriends of club members, had brought food, homemade cookies and brownies, chips and dip, fruit trays, enough to feed everyone twice over. Someone had stopped at a bakery and bought 2 additional cakes, massive sheet cakes with elaborate frosting decorations. Mason's modest party setup was completely overwhelmed by the abundance, transformed from sad and empty to overflowing with presents and celebration. Jennifer stood on the porch with tears streaming down her face, one hand covering her mouth, watching 40-plus strangers fill her yard and celebrate her son. Ruth, Steele's old lady, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd raised 5 kids of her own, climbed the porch steps and wrapped an arm around Jennifer's shoulders. "Your boy is ours now," Ruth said quietly. "Valley Thunder takes care of our own. He'll never have another birthday where nobody shows up. I promise you that." Jennifer nodded, unable to speak, and Ruth held her while she cried. This mother who'd tried so hard to give her son a normal childhood, who worked 60 hours a week between 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads, who'd scripted and saved to afford this party only to have it turn into humiliation when nobody came. Mason was surrounded by bikers, these huge men in leather who were asking him about his favorite subjects in school, his hobbies, what he wanted to be when he grew up. He answered shyly at first, then with growing confidence as he realized they were actually listening, actually interested, actually treating him like he mattered. Hawk watched from the edge of the group, his phone buzzing with messages from brothers who hadn't been able to make it, but were sending money via apps to buy Mason more presents, from chapters in other cities sending well wishes, from the broader motorcycle community responding to photos that were already circulating on social media, showing 40 bikers celebrating one lonely kid's birthday. Steele climbed onto the porch and raised his voice to carry across the yard. "Brothers, old ladies, friends, we're here today because this young man, Mason Carter, is celebrating his 8th birthday. Now, I don't know about you all, but I think 8 is a pretty important age. That's when you start figuring out who you are, what matters to you, who your real friends are. Mason learned something hard today about people he thought were friends, but he's also learning something good, that family isn't just the people you go to school with or the people who live on your street. Sometimes family is the people who show up when everyone else stays away." The gathered crowd cheered, engines revving in approval. "Mason," Steele continued, "Valley Thunder Motorcycle Club would like to make you an honorary member. Now, you can't ride with us until you're legal age, and you've got a lot of growing to do before then. But we want you to know you're part of our family now. You're under our protection. You're one of ours." Torch stepped forward carrying something wrapped in tissue paper. He unfolded it carefully to reveal a custom leather vest, youth-sized black leather with Valley Thunder MC patches already attached, not full membership patches, but honorary patches that marked Mason as protected, as claimed, as belonging. On the back, above the main patch, was embroidered text, Mason, honorary member, Valley Thunder MC. On the front, over the heart, was stitched his name. The vest was professional quality, clearly custom-made, which meant someone in the club had been working on it since Hawk's message 20 minutes ago, or more likely had pulled it from emergency inventory the club kept for situations exactly like this, because Valley Thunder had done this before, would do it again, believed in showing up for kids who needed to know they weren't alone. Hawk helped Mason put on the vest, adjusting the fit over the boy's thin shoulders. The leather was still too big, sized for growth, but Mason wore it with fierce pride, his small hands running over the patches, his eyes shining with tears he was fighting to contain. "How does it feel, kid?" Hawk asked quietly. "Like I matter," Mason whispered back, "like somebody cares." Hawk's throat tightened. "You do matter. Don't let anyone tell you different. The kids who didn't show up today, they made a mistake. They're going to grow up and realize they missed out on knowing someone worth knowing. But you've got 43 brothers now who will show up every time. Remember that. The party that followed was everything Mason's original plan should have been and more. They sang happy birthday 3 times, once for each cake, and Mason blew out his candles with a smile that seemed to light up his entire face. They ate until everyone was stuffed, played games in the yard, took turns letting Mason try to ride some of the motorcycles while they were parked with the engines off. Neighbors who'd been watching warily began to approach, drawn by the obvious joy, by the sound of laughter, by the sight of a child who'd been devastated 2 hours ago, now glowing with happiness. Jennifer talked with the old ladies, accepting casseroles and meal plans, phone numbers and offers of babysitting, the practical support of women who knew what it meant to raise kids while working impossible hours. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, Mason sat on the porch steps between Hawk and Steele, wearing his new vest, surrounded by torn wrapping paper and the evidence of celebration. He looked out at the yard full of motorcycles and people who'd been strangers 3 hours ago and were now somehow family, and his voice came out small but steady. "Why did you do this? You don't even know me." Steele exchanged a glance with Hawk before answering. "Because every single person here knows what it feels like to be forgotten, to be left out, to stand somewhere waiting for people who never show up. We've all been the kid nobody wanted at some point. And we decided a long time ago that when we see someone going through that, especially a kid, we do something about it. We show up. We prove that the world isn't as cruel as it sometimes seems." Mason absorbed this, his fingers tracing the embroidered letters of his name on the vest. "My mom says we can't afford much. She works really hard, but we don't have a lot of money. Is that why the kids didn't come? Because we're not rich like their families?" Hawk shook his head firmly. "The kids didn't come because they're being raised by people who teach them that money matters more than character, that appearances matter more than kindness. That's not your fault, and it's not your mom's fault. Your mom is raising you right, teaching you to be grateful for what you have, to work hard, to be decent. The kids who didn't show up, they're going to grow up empty inside because their parents are teaching them all the wrong values. You're going to grow up strong because your mom is teaching you the right ones." Jennifer emerged from the house carrying a camera, an older digital model that had seen better days. She'd been crying on and off for the past 3 hours, overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers, by watching her son transform from defeated to joyful. "Can I take a photo of all of you with Mason?" The brothers assembled immediately, 43 men and their old ladies gathering around one 8-year-old boy wearing his new vest, and Jennifer took photo after photo, capturing the moment from every angle. Mason stood in the center of the group, Steele's massive hand on one shoulder, Hawk's on the other, surrounded by people who'd proven that showing up mattered more than any expensive present or elaborate venue. Ruth organized the old ladies to help Jennifer pack up the food, to sort through the mountain of presents, to create order from the beautiful chaos the party had become. Several brothers were already discussing plans to come back the following weekend, to help with yard work they'd noticed needed doing, to fix the fence gate that hung crooked, to address the loose boards on the porch steps. This was what Valley Thunder did. They didn't just show up once and disappear. They integrated people into their community, made sure struggling families had ongoing support, treated acts of service as brotherhood obligations rather than charity. Mason would never know that Steele had already set up a college fund in his name, seeded with $5,000 from the club treasury, and growing as brothers contributed. He'd never know that Torch had called the manager at the auto parts store where he worked and gotten Jennifer an interview for a better-paying position with health benefits. He'd never know the extent to which these strangers had decided to reshape his future in a single afternoon. As the sun began to set and families started preparing to leave, each brother made a point of saying goodbye to Mason individually, shaking his hand, telling him to call if he ever needed anything, reinforcing that this wasn't a one-time event, but the beginning of a relationship. Viper, who'd brought the bicycle, spent 20 minutes teaching Mason how to adjust the seat and use the gears, making sure the boy understood how to maintain his new gift. Torch left his personal cell number with Jennifer, telling her to call any time, day or night, if she or Mason needed help with anything. Steele presented Jennifer with a folder containing information about Valley Thunder's community programs, the back-to-school supply drive, the holiday toy distribution, the emergency assistance fund for families in crisis. Hawk was one of the last to leave, helping to carry presents into the house, to break down the tables, to restore some order to the yard. Mason followed him everywhere, this small shadow in an oversized leather vest, clearly not wanting the day to end, not wanting to let go of the magic that had transformed his worst birthday into his best. When Hawk finally walked to his bike, Mason ran after him. "Will I see you again? Are you going to forget about me now?" Hawk knelt down one more time, looking Mason in the eyes with absolute seriousness. "I'm not going to forget about you. None of us are. You're Valley Thunder family now, and we don't abandon family. I'll be back next Saturday to take you for your first real motorcycle ride if your mom says it's okay. And you've got my number now, so you can call me whenever you want. You're stuck with us, kid." Mason launched himself at Hawk, hugging him with the fierce desperation of a child who'd spent the day being reminded that people could be good, that strangers could care, that he wasn't as alone as he'd thought. Hawk held him, this kid he'd met 4 hours ago and would now be connected to for life, and felt the weight of responsibility that came with showing up, with making promises, with becoming someone a child counted on. "Thank you for seeing my sign," Mason whispered. "Thank you for stopping. Thank you for caring." "You're welcome, buddy. Happy birthday." Hawk pulled back, ruffled Mason's hair, and swung onto his bike. The remaining brothers fired up their engines in sequence, the rumble filling the quiet residential street one last time, and they rode out in formation, leaving behind a yard full of decorations, a house full of presents, and one 8-year-old boy standing in his driveway, wearing a leather vest and waving goodbye to family he hadn't known existed that morning. The photos from Mason's party went viral within 48 hours. Someone had posted them to social media with the caption about the boys' sign and Valley Thunder's response, and the images spread across platforms, shared hundreds of thousands of times, generating national news coverage. Reporters called Steele requesting interviews, morning shows wanted to feature the story, motorcycle communities across the country shared it as an example of what brotherhood meant. But Valley Thunder declined most media requests, not wanting to exploit Mason's initial hurt for publicity, not needing external validation for doing what they considered basic human decency. They released one statement through their social media channels thanking people for the support, asking anyone moved by Mason's story to consider showing up for a lonely kid in their own community, and redirecting attention to organizations that served at-risk youth. The viral attention did have one positive effect. It flooded Valley Thunder's community programs with donations and volunteer applications. The college fund Steele had started for Mason grew to over $50,000 as strangers from across the country contributed. The club's Christmas toy drive received enough donations to serve 5,000 children instead of the usual 2,000. Families throughout Bakersfield who'd been struggling in isolation reached out for support, having seen that Valley Thunder was safe to approach, that asking for help wouldn't result in judgment. The club expanded its programs, formalized partnerships with schools to identify kids who might need extra support, created a mentorship initiative, pairing brothers with fatherless boys who needed positive male role models. Mason became a fixture at Valley Thunder events over the following months. He attended the monthly charity ride sitting behind Hawk, wearing his vest and a helmet that had been custom painted with his name. He helped at community barbecues, serving food alongside the old ladies, learning that being part of something meant contributing, not just receiving. He showed up at the clubhouse on Saturday mornings to help brothers work on their bikes, absorbing knowledge about engines and mechanics, developing skills and confidence. The transformation in him was remarkable. From the defeated child holding a sign to a boy who walked taller, spoke with assurance, smiled readily, knew without question that he had value and worth. School became easier for Mason once he understood that the classmates who'd rejected him didn't define his worth. He stopped trying to fit in with kids who'd made clear they didn't value him, and instead focused on his interests, his grades, his relationship with the few genuine friends he made. When kids asked about his leather vest, which he wore proudly whenever possible, he explained matter-of-factly that he was Valley Thunder family, that he had 43 brothers who cared about him, that being different wasn't something to hide but something to own. The bullying that had plagued him before his 8th birthday largely stopped, partly because kids were intimidated by his motorcycle club connections, partly because Mason no longer projected the vulnerability that bullies targeted, and partly because Jennifer, emboldened by Valley Thunder's support, became more assertive in advocating for her son with teachers and administrators. Jennifer's life changed too. The job interview Torch arranged led to a position with better pay and benefits, allowing her to quit one of her 2 jobs and spend more time with Mason. The old ladies integrated her into their network, providing the friendship and support she'd been missing as a single mother isolated by exhaustion and financial stress. She learned that asking for help wasn't weakness, that community could be found in unexpected places, that the bikers she'd been taught to fear were actually the safest people she'd ever encountered. When her car broke down 6 months after Mason's party, 3 brothers showed up with tools and spent a Saturday afternoon fixing it, refusing payment beyond pizza and beer. When she got sick with pneumonia and couldn't work for 2 weeks, the club made sure her rent was paid and Mason was cared for. They didn't make a show of it, didn't want thanks, simply handled it the way family handles things. On Mason's 9th birthday, Valley Thunder threw another party, this time organized in advance with Mason's input, held at the clubhouse where there was room for everyone. Over 100 people attended, club members and their families, neighbors who'd befriended the Carters, teachers who'd seen Mason's transformation, community members who'd been helped by Valley Thunder programs and wanted to celebrate the boy whose story had inspired so much generosity. Mason wore his vest with pride, no longer self-conscious about being different, comfortable in his identity as the kid who'd been adopted by a motorcycle club. When they brought out the cake, when everyone sang happy birthday, when Mason blew out his 9 candles, Hawk stood beside him and thought about the sign, about nobody came to my birthday, about how 6 words had catalyzed so much change. During the party, Steele pulled Mason aside for a private conversation. They sat on bikes parked inside the clubhouse, away from the celebration noise. "Mason, you remember last year? How you felt when nobody showed up to your party?" Mason nodded, the memory still painful despite the year of healing. "I remember. I felt like I didn't matter, like nobody cared if I existed." Steele met his eyes. "I want you to remember that feeling, not to hurt you, but so you never make another person feel that way. You've got power now, kid. You've got confidence, you've got family, you've got people who believe in you. Use that power to lift other people up, not to put them down. When you see someone alone at lunch, sit with them. When you see someone being bullied, stand up for them. When someone gets left out, include them. You know what it feels like to be forgotten, so make sure nobody around you ever feels that way if you can help it." Mason processed this seriously, understanding that Steele was giving him not just advice, but a code to live by. Is that what Valley Thunder does? Show up for people who get left out? That's exactly what we do. That's what brotherhood means. We look out for people who need looking out for. We show up when others stay away. We prove that the world has good people in it, even when everything else suggests otherwise. You're one of us now, which means you carry that responsibility too. Mason straightened, his young face showing determination beyond his years. "I can do that. I want to be like you guys. You want to be like us." Steele smiled. "Then be the kind of person who sees someone holding a sign that says nobody cares and decides right then that you're going to prove them wrong." "That's all we do, Mason. We prove people wrong when they think nobody cares." The conversation stuck with Mason as he grew older. At 10, he befriended the new kid at school who spoke limited English and was being excluded by classmates, sitting with him at lunch every day, helping him navigate the social dynamics, making sure he wasn't alone. At 11, he started a club at school for kids interested in mechanics and building things, creating space for the quiet kids who didn't fit into sports or traditional social groups. At 12, he volunteered with Valley Thunder's toy drive, spending his winter break helping sort donations and distribute presents to families who couldn't afford Christmas gifts. He lived the code Steele had taught him, using his own experience of rejection to identify and support others going through similar struggles. Hawk remained Mason's primary connection to Valley Thunder throughout these years, the brother who showed up most consistently, who took him riding, who taught him about motorcycles, who listened when Mason needed to talk. They developed the kind of relationship that transcended the circumstances of their meeting, becoming genuine friends despite the age difference. Hawk attended Mason's school events when Jennifer had to work, sat in the audience at award ceremonies and science fairs, helped with homework when Mason struggled with math. He never tried to replace Mason's absent father, never overstepped the boundaries of mentorship, but he was present and consistent in a way that gave Mason the male role model he desperately needed. When Mason turned 13, Valley Thunder held a ceremony at the clubhouse to present him with an updated vest, sized for his growth, still bearing his honorary member patches but now also including a rocker that read, "Family," marking 5 years of belonging. Steele made a speech about watching Mason grow from a hurt 8-year-old to a confident teenager who embodied the values the club stood for. "You've become the kind of young man we're proud to claim," Steele said. "You treat people with respect. You stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. You work hard, you're honest, you contribute to your community. That's what we value in Valley Thunder. Not how much money you have or what you look like or whether you ride a motorcycle. We value character, and you've got it in abundance." Mason stood before the assembled club members, older now but still small compared to the massive bikers surrounding him, and spoke with the poise he'd developed over 5 years of being taken seriously by adults who expected him to rise to their standards. "When I was 8 and holding that sign, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd always be the kid nobody wanted, the outsider, the one people forgot about. But you all proved me wrong. You showed me that family isn't about blood, it's about choice. You chose me when you didn't have to. You showed up when everyone else stayed away. You taught me what it means to be part of something bigger than myself. The only thing I want in my life is to make you proud, to be worthy of wearing this vest, to show other people the same kindness you showed me." The clubhouse erupted in cheers, engines revving, brothers embracing this teenager who'd become one of their own. Hawk wrapped Mason in a bear hug, this kid he'd seen holding a devastating sign 5 years ago and had watched transform into a young man of substance. "I'm already proud of you," Hawk said quietly. "We all are." Mason pulled back, his eyes bright. "When I'm old enough, I want to prospect. I want to earn my full patches. I want to be Valley Thunder for real, not just honorary." Hawk smiled. "Then you work hard, you stay out of trouble, you finish school, and when you're 18, we'll talk about it. But you've got to earn it, Mason. Being handed honorary patches as a kid is one thing. Earning full membership as an adult is different. You've got to prove you're committed, that you understand what this brotherhood demands." "I'll prove it," Mason promised. "I'll make you proud." Over the next 5 years, Mason did exactly that. He excelled in school, graduating high school with honors and a full scholarship to a technical college for automotive engineering. He worked part-time at a shop owned by one of the Valley Thunder brothers, developing his mechanical skills, earning his own money, learning the value of labor and craftsmanship. He stayed involved in community service, volunteering with youth programs, mentoring younger kids who were going through struggles similar to what he'd experienced. He stayed out of the trouble that claimed many of his peers, avoiding drugs and gangs and the criminal activity that was prevalent in his neighborhood, anchored by the knowledge that he represented Valley Thunder, and his choices reflected on the club that had invested so much in him. On his 18th birthday, Mason formally applied to prospect for Valley Thunder Motorcycle Club. The process was rigorous, deliberately so, because the club took membership seriously and didn't make exceptions even for someone they'd known since childhood. Mason spent a year prospecting, proving his commitment, learning protocols, performing the unglamorous work that tested whether he genuinely wanted to be part of the brotherhood or just wanted to wear the patches. He cleaned clubhouse bathrooms, ran errands, set up for events, did whatever was asked without complaint. He rode thousands of miles, attended every meeting, participated in every community service project. He studied the club's history and values, demonstrated that he understood what Valley Thunder stood for, and was willing to uphold those standards. When the vote came for Mason's full membership, it was unanimous. 47 members voted yes, welcoming the young man who'd been honorary family for 10 years into full brotherhood. The patching ceremony was held on a Saturday afternoon in late April, exactly 10 years after Hawk had seen an 8-year-old holding a sign that said, "Nobody came to my birthday." The clubhouse was packed with members, old ladies, family, and friends who'd watched Mason's journey from rejected child to respected young man. Steele performed the ceremony, removing Mason's honorary vest and replacing it with a full cut bearing the Valley Thunder MC patches he'd earned, the rockers marking him as a patched member, equal, and brother. Hawk stood beside Mason throughout the ceremony, his hand on the young man's shoulder, feeling emotions he couldn't quite name. Pride, certainly, watching someone he'd mentored become the kind of man any father would be honored to claim. Gratitude that he'd stopped at that intersection 10 years ago, that he'd taken the photo, that he'd made the call that changed Mason's trajectory. And something deeper, the knowledge that this was why he wore his own patches, why he rode with Valley Thunder, why brotherhood mattered. It wasn't about motorcycles or leather or looking tough. It was about showing up for people who needed someone to show up. It was about proving that the world had more good in it than bad. It was about transforming pain into purpose and loneliness into belonging. Mason's first ride as a full member was the same route Hawk had been riding 10 years earlier when he'd seen the sign. They rode past the house on Fairview in Chester, where a different family lived now, but where the memory of that April afternoon lived forever in Valley Thunder history. Mason looked at the yard where he'd stood holding cardboard and marker, declaring his invisibility to the world, and he felt the distance between that 8-year-old and the man he'd become. The vest he wore wasn't honorary anymore. The family surrounding him wasn't temporary. The belonging he felt wasn't conditional. He had earned it through years of work and commitment and choosing every day to be worthy of the investment 43 strangers had made in a forgotten child. Jennifer attended Mason's patching ceremony with tears streaming down her face, watching her son being embraced by men who'd shaped him as much as she had, who'd provided the stability and support and male guidance she couldn't give him alone. Ruth sat beside her, holding her hand. These two women who'd met because of a birthday party disaster and had become sisters through a decade of shared community. "Your boy made it," Ruth said quietly. "From that awful day to this amazing one. You raised him right, Jennifer. All the credit goes to you." Jennifer shook her head. "All the credit goes to the man who stopped his motorcycle instead of driving past. All the credit goes to a club that cared more about a stranger's child than his own classmates did. You all saved him. You all saved both of us." The story of Mason's 8th birthday became legend in Valley Thunder MC, told to prospects and new members as an example of what the club stood for, shared at community events as proof that small acts of showing up could change lives, referenced whenever someone needed reminding why they wore their patches and what those patches demanded of them. The original photo Hawk had taken, the 8-year-old with his devastating sign, hung in the clubhouse alongside the photo from Mason's patching ceremony 10 years later, a before and after that captured transformation, redemption, and the power of chosen family. Beneath the photos was a placard with 6 words that had become Valley Thunder's unofficial motto, a reminder of their core mission and the reason they rode. Nobody came became everybody came, and one forgotten child became one cherished brother. Years later, when Mason was 25 and working as a master mechanic at a shop he co-owned with Torch, he received a message through Valley Thunder's social media from a mother in Texas whose 9-year-old daughter had experienced the same devastating birthday rejection Mason had endured. The woman had seen Mason's story years ago and saved it, and now she was reaching out asking for advice on how to help her daughter heal from the hurt of being forgotten. Mason spent an hour on the phone with the mother, sharing his experience, offering perspective from someone who'd survived it, and then he connected her with a motorcycle club in her area that ran similar community programs to Valley Thunder. 2 weeks later, he received photos of the girl's birthday party, surrounded by 40 bikers who'd shown up to prove she mattered, wearing a custom vest marking her as honorary family, her face showing the same transformation Mason remembered from his own 8th birthday. That became Mason's mission as he matured, using his story to inspire others to show up, to pay attention to forgotten kids, to understand that small acts of recognition and inclusion could alter life trajectories. He spoke at schools and community centers, sharing the before and after of his life, emphasizing that he wasn't special or remarkable, but simply someone who'd been seen by people willing to care. He worked with Valley Thunder to expand their youth programs, creating formal mentorship structures, partnering with schools to identify at-risk kids who needed positive adult involvement, building systems that ensured what had happened for him accidentally could happen for others intentionally. The vest Mason wore at 25 still bore the same patches he'd received at 18, plus additional rockers marking his service to the club, his role as youth program coordinator, his commitment to the values that had saved him. But in his workshop, in a frame on the wall where he could see it every day, hung a piece of cardboard with 6 words written in shaky 8-year-old handwriting. Nobody came to my birthday. He kept it as a reminder of where he'd started, of the pain that could have defined him, but instead had become his purpose, of the moment when a biker named Hawk had chosen to stop instead of driving past and had changed everything. Because that was the truth underneath the whole story, the lesson that couldn't be taught but only learned through experience. Every person who chose to show up when others stayed away, who chose to see someone being overlooked, who chose to care when caring was inconvenient, became part of a chain of transformation that could ripple across years and lives and communities. Mason had been saved by 43 people choosing to spend a Saturday afternoon at a stranger's house. And he'd spent the 15 years since then trying to be the person who showed up for others the way Valley Thunder had shown up for him, proving over and over that the simplest act of recognition, of saying, "You matter and I see you and you're not alone," could be the difference between a child who believed they were forgettable and a man who knew with absolute certainty that he belonged.